two examples of things that I would want to manufacture on Mars quickly so that you can, because if you can ramp up electricity production
Yeah.
and electricity storage,
Yeah.
that makes Mars very advantageous for certain kinds of.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Next Big Future. Today, I'm going to talk with Warren Redlick about SpaceX and Mars. I think a lot of people don't understand the scale of what's happening and what needs to happen, and also how to do things on Mars that would become profitable and be very useful. So first, I will have a deck prepared for this, and then Warren has a lot of ideas about SpaceX, Elon, and Mars, and I will
And
have
the,
him
and the
give his
FAA.
comments. And the FAA, yes. Okay, so let me just start my little slideshow here. So something that I've said is that there's a big money problem, and have a Stephen Mark Meyer thing of solving the money problem for Mars money problem, and I think Mars with Gigafactories is I think a critical component what needs to be done. Otherwise, it costs Elon trillions of dollars, which he may be able to make from SpaceX and Starlink, but it's better not to stress these things too far. So here we have an image of Tesla Gigafactory on Mars, a little red of Mars. So the trillions for Mars. So
Wait, was that AI generated? That's fantastic. How did you get that?
that's just a Google image search. Someone made it. I think they did it and they just color corrected and made it orange. I should, I
That's
haven't been
pretty
able to
sweet.
get, yeah, it's
That's pretty
nice.
sweet. I like that.
Yeah. Um, so trillion for Mars. I did some calculation and Warren commented about it. Elon has said, okay, we're going to send a fleet of 1,000 starships to Mars every 2 years, and that'll move 250,000 tons to Mars every 2 years, where there's a window where Earth and Mars get close, and that's when you send it over. And then you launch 1.5 million tons up to orbit because you have to do this refueling thing. So that potentially can be trillions of dollars, which is very expensive, and I don't think you necessarily can count on contribution and long-term data contribution from the government of Earth, which is why you have to have a very profitable company to do it here. For give people some ideas of scales of very profitable companies, Meta, Facebook, is now worth I think about $2 trillion or like 1.5 trillion, something like that, and they have spent upwards of about $50 billion on the metaverse. So they have this plan where they believe that people want to live in virtual worlds, and that has not really made money for them. They have Oculus devices, which are like the VR headsets. They can sell that hardware, but making the software has not been working out for them yet. And they continue to plan to continue to spend tens of billions of dollars every year on metaverse and on AI to get to a long-term payoff. So now we have companies like that, like Microsoft, like Google, spending tens of billions of dollars for AI, not getting payoff yet, expecting payoff in the future. So um, Elon just talked about sending 5 starships to Mars in 2026, and um,
I predicted that number, by the way.
okay, that's great. Um, you have to get so that was a good call. They got that number that
If you want to send humans the next cycle, you want to have
yeah,
enough reliable landings to say it's reliable enough that we can launch humans this cycle. So
right.
if all five land successfully, you can say, all right, and you learn from each launch and landing, so you're more likely to be successful in the future launches.
Yeah.
But if you launch one rocket and it lands successfully, do you have enough data to be confident to send humans?
No, you don't. That's right. You
And
don't.
even three might not be enough. So if you can get five there, then that's great. And if five of them bring cargo that'll be useful for the humans that come the next cycle, great.
Hmm. And then you space them out. The window is about a few months long, so you can send every week or two. So if you try to land, things don't work out, you can adjust some things, send some things, let's try to do things a bit differently, adjust the timing of the landing, doing a bunch of stuff like that. And people can't assume that you can land on Mars because NASA and the Russians and other countries have sent missions to Mars, and on the order of half of them fail, or like a significant number fail because they just can't stick the landing on Mars. So the 1,000 ships is just for scale is as big as the entire fleet of like United airplanes, airlines, airplanes. The biggest airlines in the world have about 1,000 planes. You need tankers, all that tonnage that we just described. Um, Elon has 5 steps: make requirements less dumb, try hard to delete. I mean, feeling hard to delete,
You
simplify or
you
optimize,
you
accelerate the
deleted an E.
cycle.
You're doing it.
I,
You're doing
I
it.
deleted an E and I added an O. So anyway, so what I bring this up because I believe that a lot of things that Elon's doing with SpaceX and Tesla is simplifying the supply chain. Because if I need to move a city to Mars, basically need to move a supply chain to Mars. So by simplifying supply chain, don't need oil, don't need other components, just need a battery like the Tesla cars reducing the number of parts from like tens of thousands down to like 1,000 parts, something like that. So fewer parts, simpler parts, eliminated materials, don't need cobalt, something like that. You can get it so that you can move everything over to Mars. So the D-Day invasion had 7,000 ships in World War II, and they moved 570,000 tons. So the 250,000 tons is on the order of 40% of a D-Day invasion, all these ships. And you're saying that every 2 years
And
to
hopefully nobody was
Mars.
shooting at us.
And no one's shooting at us. Yeah, all that Mars war. So moving a factory, Gigafactory, you don't necessarily have to move the whole building, right? The building, you can, a shell, and if things are airless outside, you kind of like leave it outside. Like Tesla had the tent system for the Model 3, where basically they just had a sprung tent and then didn't have a building. So you wouldn't necessarily need to have the building. So you just need the machinery, gigapresses, other machines that you make. And then you have to make them transportable in 100-ton or 200-ton chunks at most, probably less, to bring them over to Mars and then put them back together again. And the other thing is that you would move Starfactories. So on Starbase, they uh, they have made outdoors and indoors the facilities, mega bays, high bays, all that stuff to build starships. So building the Raptor engines and building the starships, you also want to move that over to Mars. And here's an example of the high bay with like 5 of the heavy boosters looking wonderful. So um, each one weighs about fully fueled weigh about 5,000 tons, but empty dry weight a few hundred tons. And also you bring over 1,000 with you in each of your fleets. So, so I think that if you can build this capability, as well as making Tesla bots, if 1 million Tesla bots embarked, I say that's a technological singularity where basically things go crazy. So if you succeed over the next few years to have tens of thousands of Tesla bots in each of the factories, that is another human I don't have to bring over to Mars because a human needs water, air, fuel. The Tesla bot only needs electricity, right? And maybe a little bit of lubricant.
You
So
can turn it off for the flight.
you turn off for the flight. And so like if
Doesn't even
I'm
need
traveling,
electricity for the flight.
right, for each person, you need it takes about a ton of water and food and other things. Each Tesla bot only weighs 50 kilos, so weighs less than most people. And then you don't need to bring anything with them. And then when they're there, I don't need to build a dome with air and stuff like that for the Tesla bot. I can have them working outside in the Martian atmosphere with CO2, and they're fine. Especially if I make one more durable, like whatever I have to make to handle any like Martian dust, etc.
Radiation shielding. Yeah.
Radiation shielding, right? Um, Tesla bots can make the Earth economically abundant, and I think that means Mars can be economically abundant as well. And that so let's go to some of the costs of the $1 trillion. $250,000 per Raptor engine, maybe 500,000, but they want to get to 250,000. 40 engines per Super Heavy booster and Starship. So that's $10 million worth of engines. If you double the cost, that might be $10 million, another $10 million for the other metal and other components. That's $20 million. A Starship only has 6 to 9 of the engines. So that's about $2 million worth of engines, $4 to $5 million for a total Starship once you get down to the cost of materials. And you get 100 uses of them. I think you would used starships using starships to launch a bunch of Starlinks satellites up to orbit to move cargo on Earth. You ideally would want to, because you can send the ship away to Mars for 2 years, 4 years, something like that. You
Three
want to
years.
use used ones, 3 years. You want to have a used one go over there. So fleet cost, the five ships you talked about for 2026, $200 million-ish, if you can get the cost down. For early ones might be more expensive, 40 refuelings, $300 million plus whatever your mission costs are, like and loaded up with stuff, which could be more expensive. And they're going to make a 4,000 engine factory. That means you can get up to 100 starships going. But if I want, with super heavy boosters, to get to 1,000 starships, I need 40,000 engines. So I need to up my engine factory capacity up to 40,000
You don't have to manufacture 1,000 starships a year.
every 2 years.
And
Yeah,
no,
no, but
you have to keep in mind that, you know, the starships that you send to Mars are going to return after 3 years. Most of
yeah,
them,
right.
not necessarily all of them, but most of them. And um, it's an average. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to have 1,000 starships, starting in 2031,
Mm-hmm.
and then those, you're going to do manufacture 1,000 starships a year. The early days, there will be, the first mission to Mars will probably be one human mission
Mm-hmm.
and maybe 10 people on it, or I don't know,
Right.
six people on it. I don't know. That's an interesting question. How many people do you put on the first mission? And
Mm-hmm.
then 2 years later, assuming all goes well, then probably going to have 10 or more ships go with people.
Right.
Um, and then you expand over time. And then the
Mm-hmm.
refueling, by the way, you don't need one starship can do all the refuelings
Mm-hmm.
of
Right. You can
all
keep up and
you're
down five
probably going
times.
to have more than one refueling. And you may have a propellant depot
Mm-hmm.
in space the refueling ship goes to the propellant depot and refuels the propellant depot, and the propellant depot is, you know, holding all the fuel, the propellant.
Mm-hmm.
It's not technically fuel. It's liquid hydrogen, or sorry, it's liquid methane and liquid oxygen.
Yeah.
Um, and the ships that are going to Mars, refill at the propellant depot. That may be a more efficient way of doing it than having a refilling starship refill each
Mm-hmm.
individual ship. I don't that I don't know the answer to that question.
Right.
And I would guess, the window. I think Elon said the window is 6 months long, but I think probably optimally you want to launch within about a month.
Yeah.
So you
Right.
probably have one launch every week for five
Mm-hmm.
weeks.
Yeah.
And then this is critical. The first one tries to land and either successfully or doesn't successfully land, but it generates a lot of data.
Yeah.
And you feed that data back to the rest of the fleet, and you have enough time in a week to reprogram the second ship to
Yeah.
change its landing, its reentry and its entry to the Martian atmosphere and its landing. And
Mm-hmm.
then you get that data and you reprogram the third ship, and you get that data and you reprogram the fourth ship. And maybe the first one doesn't land successfully,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if the second, third, and fourth all land successfully, and you've improved your landings each one, and you say, okay, we're confident on the next mission,
Right.
you can do it right because we've learned so much from the first five. Problem is, if you only do three and the first one fails and the second two land, do you feel like you have enough success to be able to send humans?
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I think five is necessary. And I think it's optimistic. I'm sorry, one other point, which is you're approaching the cost structure from trying to look at everything. And
Yeah.
I think you can make it simpler by saying, well, what's the cost of sending one starship to Mars
Mm-hmm.
at scale?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And Elon's estimate, I think Gwynne Shotwell's estimate, is it's going to cost $200,000 a person.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's round trip because the starships will mostly be returning empty, so it'll be easy to put somebody on a seat to return home.
Yeah.
Uh, some of the people want to come home, but some of the people are going to stay on Mars.
Yeah.
So there will be empty seats on the starships coming home.
Right.
So $200,000 to send people to Mars, and then I think you're looking at my ballpark estimate is 800,000. If it's $200,000 per person, then you spend $800,000 on sending stuff to Mars,
Yeah.
and that means it's $1 million a person times a
Mm-hmm.
million people is $1 trillion.
Right.
It's
Right.
it's a $1 trillion cost to send a million people to Mars with all the stuff that you need to go with them.
Right.
So you were saying trillions, and I don't think it's maybe Elon's over optimistic, but I think towards the end of it's a 20-year span where you're sending an average of a million, 100,000
1,000.
people a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100,000 people every 2 years. Um, the later part of the cycle, the later part of that period, your costs are declining. You're
Yeah.
getting more efficient at doing these things. So, and a few years in, you're starting to make stuff on Mars, and the more stuff you make on Mars, and the more ability you develop to manufacture on Mars, the less you need to bring from Earth.
Right. So I that's one of the things I focus on is that that you want to make the factories on Mars. So you're building stuff. You make the infrastructure like landing pads, like Mechazilla towers on the other end, like the number of Mechazilla towers you need to launch the fleet. So if it's five refueling, they're 10 refueling. That's 5,000, 10,000 refueling launches over the course of 2 years. So if you left them up in orbit, gathering up, or if you do it in a burst, over, 6 months or something like that, that affects the infrastructure of how many launch towers you need to get things up there. And then I think you're correct that if you reuse the ships or even build ships on the other end and the facilities, then the cost, um, the, the economics of generating new material over there may not be if I as long as I'm not paying for it over here, I'm like almost it's coming free because I have a bunch of Teslabots over there making energy, making fuel, making ships, making other things, and sending them back. That can be an offsetting revenue that's coming back at capex thing coming back. That's coming.
I want to make a point here that I think is really important that people, and it's not popular, it's not going to be popular with some people, but if you want this to happen right now, the FAA is doing everything it can to slow SpaceX down.
Right.
And if you had a president who said, this is ridiculous,
Hmm.
we need Starship for national security purposes. We want to get to Mars. We want to be able to launch things into space. We
Hmm.
want to be able to get space telescopes up. The idea that we need to worry about a sonic boom or the location of a propellant farm, and we need
Hmm.
to have NASA actively interfering with, sorry, the FAA actively interfering in the fish and wildlife, start using federal agencies to harass the company that's going to get us to Mars and the company that's going to enable much better. The people don't realize this, like Starshield,
Yeah.
right? The military wants a Starlink like satellite network, and SpaceX is going to deliver that. Like, why are you getting in the way? And
Right.
we have the opportunity. I don't even like the guy, but we have the opportunity to have a president who's going to see this and say, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's going to order the FAA to get out of the way.
Right.
Not completely not regulate, but to like stop throwing ridiculous curveballs and making it hard.
Right.
And we're not going to get to Mars if the federal agencies are determined to stop it. And we
Eh,
have a president and we have a vice president now running for president who appear to be actively opposed to the things that Elon wants to do. They have
And,
opposed him, and it's
mm,
not because he bought X, it's not because he has because his mean posts.
mhm,
They opposed him from the very beginning, from the EV summit in 2021.
mhm,
Uh, before Elon bought X, before Elon was posting anything negative about Democrats, they
mhm,
started attacking him. Frankly, Biden attacked him during the campaign in 2020, doing a
mhm.
fucking Chevy commercial.
Yeah.
Sorry, he
Yeah.
did a Chevy commercial in his campaign,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Mhm,
Chevy's going to lead us in EVs. Like, are you
yeah.
kidding me? They
Right.
have been hating on Elon and if you want to look, you can hate the orange man as much as you want. If
Mhm,
you want to get to Mars, there's one guy who's going to get us there,
yeah.
and one candidate supports him, and one candidate wants to arrest him.
Yep. Yep.
Oh no, she's never said she wants to arrest him. She wants to arrest him. They want to
Right.
stop him. They're throwing everything they can to try to
Mhm,
stop SpaceX. It's mind-boggling. We
mhm.
know the military wants Starship.
Yeah.
We know that NASA wants Starship.
Mhm,
Why is the FAA getting in the way with these trivial things? And if you had a president who cared would be Elon would go to the president, say, "Hey,
mhm,
this is ridiculous. Do something about it." And the president would call the head of the FAA and say, "What the hell are you doing?" And right now we have a president who can't find his way home from the beach,
mhm.
and we have a presidential candidate who, doesn't want to be troubled by what uh, we want to be able to see what has been without being
Yeah.
stopped by what is coming
What,
from
what's been?
whatever,
Yeah.
all she keeps
Unburdened
up
what
with
has
is
been.
nonsense.
Yeah. No, it's actually
This is really important. We're not going to
yeah.
get there if we don't get the FAA on board.
Right. So let's have that side discussion of that issue. So one for things like geopolitics and national strength and those kinds of things. Because that's often people couch that, oh, we have to protect democracy and do all this kind of stuff, right? If you have a fleet of 1,000 starships, right, you can view all the fancy planes, Top Gun planes that we have, kind of like World War One biplanes. World War One biplanes are what you got with those things, right? And then the Starship is basically 1,000 B-52 bombers or 1,000 supersonic whatever planes because they go 10 times faster. Mach 20 instead of Mach 2. Ooh, Mach 2 faster, 10 times faster than a 200 mile biplane, right? So the thing is, this thing is just next level capability. And fortunately, Elon is an American and he's supporting America to do that. And then the reason it's okay for China is that no more of this peer competitor. Oh, China's so powerful that they're coming, whatever. We'll have 1,000 B-52s, or you can make like 20,000 B-52 things equivalent versus their biplane. So they will be behind us by 20 years, right? And again, it's like, oh, we're fighting over resources on Earth. You start conquering Mars, adding the asteroids, there's a million times more stuff in the solar system.
Yeah,
Plenty for
we don't need
everyone.
we don't need to fight over resources on Earth. There's infinite resources in space, and we should be working together to get there.
Right, right. And then, like I said, the whole thing is like we have Starship, it is working, it is more powerful than any weapon that currently exists, including nuclear, including nuclear. Because I load that thing up with ball bearings, and then I dump the ball bearings out at Mach 20, and they each hit like high explosive, right? So basically, without radiation, I can flatten multiple square miles, right? I can knock down any plane, any
I
missile.
don't like to think about that, but it does have a weapon use. And by the way, I think by the end of the 20 years,
Yeah,
there will be 10,000 starships.
yeah, maybe 10,000 starship. Yeah, even more.
There'll be more than 1,000 starships making the trip to Mars. There will be other starships that are doing the refilling. There
Yeah,
will be starships launching stuff for Earth.
yeah,
There will be starships for the military. I think by the end of 20 years, there will be 10,000 starships.
right.
And
And yes, so then you're basically saying, do I want not just a future, but the future or not? Because basically it's like I can stay here and then we can have dirty industries on here and we're polluting stuff we just can't get off, right? But now if we have the option of moving whatever we feel like to the moon, whatever we feel like to Mars, then and to the rest of the solar system, and then bring back whatever we want, then we can say, okay, any polluting industries, we can shove it over there and it's not doing anything to our atmosphere because it's outside the atmosphere. And if we want to go next level in capability, there's something called Project Orion, which is you make nuclear bombs and drop them off the back, and they can go to like 5% of the speed of light, right? So, so then you can build that outside the Earth's atmosphere, and then go again wherever we want. Basically, like go to a Star Trek-like future, right?
yeah,
But people say, oh, well, nuclear. If you're launching all these weapons, I think there's too much destructive power. If I'm going 5% of the speed of light, however I did it, solar sails, whatever, I turn that around. Anything I run into, I'm hitting it with a nuclear force, right? Because speed is nuclear. So people don't understand, like, the Star Trek stuff. It's like once you're that fast, like there's
energy
um
rises with the square of the
yeah,
velocity, and the velocity of 0.5 speed of light is an insane amount of velocity.
the super popular YouTube comic guy XYCD or something like that, where he does things like showing you with physics the speed and destruction. He's always blowing up the Earth and that kind of stuff. That's what happened with speed. So going 20 times faster than the speed of sound means you are more powerful. And people say, oh, there's hypersonic weapons. Those hypersonic weapons are just sticking it on the end of a rocket and then having a little bit of steering at the end. It's not a real thing. It can't really maneuver. If it can
Right.
maneuver at speed, it's different. So, anyway, so all this stuff about Elon he's basically like Tony Stark in Marvel Universe. They say, I can give you world peace. What else do you want today? Right? Because basically, with his technology, Everyone else falls behind, and there's no threat of war because there's no like miscalculation. Maybe I can beat them. That was the problem with World War II, is Japan and Germany thought maybe I can beat them. They were wrong. And
Yeah.
so by not getting anyone confused, like where it's like, oh, um, some other smaller country, I don't fight the US because they're way too powerful. I don't fight the US because they're way too powerful. Then you don't have the wars. There's no confusion as to who's stronger, right? So when you have 1,000 starships, you are stronger, you win, and because you're making so much money, you're not abusing anyone else because
All
like
right.
I
So
don't care. Okay, so
I took
yeah,
you off your slide deck. Do you want to go back to your slide deck?
sure. I'll go back to my slide deck.
I apologize.
No, no, no. It's an important thing to discuss. You know, the fact that Elon is being delayed by FAA. These plans can be stopped by administration. So, anyways, Starlink factories are being built in Texas. So they make the satellites, also make the dishes. The actual money to pay for all these things is in the dishes, because each of the dishes, over 3 million out there right now, each making over $1,000 per, and some for more specialized purposes make a lot more money. So over 6,380 Starlink satellites up there, basically over half of the world's satellites, I think 80%, I think 9%, 99% will be Starlink satellites. And there's 70 Star Shield satellites, which
Oh, they
Warren
already
already
have
mentioned.
70 of them up? I didn't know
They
that.
already have 70 up. They have 70 up. So those went up in like three test launches and then three launches of 20 at a time. They're mini version twos. And they just did the laser connection test. The reason Starshield is going to make so much money for them is that for the Ukraine war, Starlinks were used, and the Russians couldn't hack them because SpaceX engineers were able to update encoding and stuff like that faster than Russia could hack it. So that super impressed the U.S. military. And then basically any military, any government, any banking or crypto communication that you want to be secure, you will use Starshield. It will be like the Bloomberg financial trading terminals, where everyone pays $20,000, $50,000 per year for a Bloomberg terminal so they can trade better on the stock exchanges. Starshield will be like, if I want to have secure communications for crypto, finance, everything, I will pay $20,000 a year for this service. If there's 1 million people using that, that's like,
Yeah, I thought,
um,
sorry, I'm concerned about your language. I think
mm.
Star Shield is for military purposes, and Starlink would be used for commercial purposes. I don't think the military Star Shield satellites are going to be used for commercial purposes.
Okay, some overlap. There will be something like a super encrypted version, high-end Starlink that will
Okay.
be similar to Starshield technology that'll be used for finance. So yeah,
Okay.
there will be military government, and then there'll be a commercial version, but also with encryption and stuff like that
It
for
would be
there.
really cool if Goldman Sachs said, "Hey, we want our own Starlink network."
Right, right.
So some of the biggest banks can get together and say, "Hey, can we have our own Starlink network?"
Right. So this is a breakdown by payload. I have a similar kind of analysis where you break down the different products they have: residential, business, aviation. United just signed a deal with Starlink to put Starlink into every plane, 1,000 planes, and they would pay a higher amount. These guys estimate about $25,000 per month for an aviation Starlink. So all of United would end up being about $100 million or $120 million a year. And then if you have all the planes, that's another 10 times that. So that'd be about $2 million per year of that. The business thing can grow a huge amount. So by putting up more satellites, it would make a lot more money from aviation, from cruise ships and everything else. So right now they're at probably $7 billion, $6.8 billion this year, not counting the launch stuff. And then this revenue, if you 10x it, by putting up more satellites and more dishes and stuff like that, that'd be $70 billion almost. And then you could potentially go up 100 times and they'd be looking at $700 billion
But
off,
just, I
off that
mean,
money.
the way I look at it is you're probably looking at least 100 million customers
Yeah.
and a ballpark average, and maybe less than this, but a ballpark average of $1,000 a year a piece.
Mhm.
If you have 100 million customers paying $1,000 a piece, That's $100 billion a year in revenue.
Yeah.
And I think the market may actually be 300 million,
Hmm.
um, which takes a little longer to get there. But if we're already at 3 million, like, the way SpaceX, Elon's companies ramp, we're going to be at 100 million in 5 years.
Right.
And then the market grows to 300 million seems likely. And then, your average revenue is probably less than, like, poorer countries are not charging $1,000 a year. So you're probably, maybe your average revenue is $500 a year, but you got 300 million of them. Now you're at $150 billion a year in revenue or more.
Right.
And then the thing is that people don't get is the cost, because you're launching yourself, and because Starship in particular lowers launch costs, and because you're mass producing these satellites yourself. Um, and I haven't even got into, by the way, the direct sell to satellite feature. Like, what's the revenue from that? I'm not sure what the revenue is from that. That might be substantial.
Mm.
There may be other sources of revenue. Maybe they start delivering, you know, uh, a Netflix-like service or something like that over Starlink. Who knows what the potential is there? Um, but I think you're looking at the thing is the cost once you get the satellite launched.
Hmm.
It's it's first of all, it's cheap to launch the satellite and it runs for 5 years. I think the average life of a Starlink satellite will be about 5 years, but your
Hmm.
launch costs are declining. So my my ballpark estimate was $100 billion a year in revenue, $10 billion a year in cost,
Right.
with 5 billion of that being launch costs. It's just surprisingly inexpensive to launch satellites once you
Hmm.
have Starship operating, and reusing both up, lower and upper stages.
Hmm.
So you're talking about $90 billion a year in gross profit,
Right.
and so $50 billion a year in net profit. Okay, well, how much does that? And they're explicit that Starlink will pay for Mars.
Right.
They've
Right.
explicitly said that the profits from Starlink will pay for Mars.
Yeah.
Well, and that may the fact that you're taking your revenue from Starlink and you're putting it into Mars probably has a tax benefit. So maybe you're not paying so
Hmm.
much money in taxes on your $90 billion in gross profit, because so
Yeah.
much of it is going into capex for, and launch costs for opening up Mars.
Hmm.
That I think they have ample revenue from Starlink to fund Mars.
Right.
They don't
Yeah.
they don't need Elon to write checks. They don't need the government to write checks.
Hmm.
I think there's an interesting question about whether people will pay to go to Mars or whether they will be paid to go to Mars. I
Hmm.
think in the early days, people will be paid to go to Mars, but once you have a functioning colony, will people pay
Hmm.
$100,000?
Hmm.
And they get their own plot of, part of it is you're getting your condo or your plot of land or whatever it
Hmm.
is. You're
Yeah.
getting something for that money, and you're getting the opportunity to get in at the ground stage on, I think the Martian economy may be the biggest growth opportunity that humans will have access to, because it will not be tied down by these large governments that make everything difficult. If you're a libertarian and you want
Yeah.
to see a gulch, nothing could be close. There's no military expenditure because there's nobody that can attack you,
Yeah.
right? Um, there's no predator
Yep.
in space. There's no rival. So you don't spend money on military and you don't spend money on a DMV.
Yeah.
Like, there's all these government agencies you don't need anymore. And if you start up a company on Mars, there's nobody's going to take your company away. There's no taxes. I mean,
Right.
there's probably not going to be significant taxes initially. So there's a tremendous opportunity to, build a future and generational wealth by building something on Mars. If you
So
were
I
one of
have
the
some comments on that.
if you were
Yeah.
one of the
Good.
early families in North America, one of the early European families in North America, not one of the early Native American families in North America, if you're one of the early European families in North America, there's a really strong chance you got very wealthy
Right.
and like game-changing wealth for your
Right.
entire, for generations of your family.
Right.
So go ahead. Sorry.
So, in terms of one comment was you mentioned the direct to cell phone communication. So there are 1,000 satellites up there that can communicate directly to cell phones. They're testing them out, and then T-Mobile, several other phone companies have signed up for it. So the nature of that is that it can't communicate at quite as fast a speed as going to a dish, going to your cell phone, because it treats it like a long distance cell tower. But in the range of 30 megabits per second. If you split it up among 10,000 users at the same time, you're getting about 1G communication, like that 1,000 bits per second. Plenty enough for text. You maybe even only need 10, 1/10 of that for texting. And then it would also be giving you a certain level of low level internet access and low level voice. Voice, if you have like 2K, 2000 bits per second, that was what we had in the days of dial-up modem. We have 2000 bits. So then you can have voice modem at that speed. Um, so basically, then you can serve billions of people with that. Like everyone on their phone could have in anywhere. Because this would be anywhere you could see the sky, Antarctica, whatever, desert, you could then communicate. So no dead zones. The um, phone companies, T-Mobile and them, they could retire half of their cell towers, which cost them $20,000, $50,000 per year for leasing and other costs. They get rid of those things, and then they save and there's like 5 million cell towers. I discussed that later in my deck. And to get rid of 2.5 million of them, they save money off that. And then they get this better remote service for them. Um, and so if I have text anywhere, low level internet anywhere, voice anywhere, that's about like $10 a month, maybe $20 a month if I get it to higher speed when I get more stuff up there. And then also I can get a special phone where it's like I don't care about really high speed. I just want to have voice and internet and text. Then um, SpaceX, Starlink, I would anticipate making a cheap phone. And then also they can improve the communication speed by adding a small um, uh, antenna, kind of like um, some kind of like antenna thing that fits in the back to up the speed. So they can continue to improve that they get.
Just
So
I have this theory that we're all going to be wearing rectangular hats, and
okay,
the hat will be the Starlink antenna,
right.
and it'll like have Bluetooth to your phone or what. Like, this is total silliness, right? But
Right.
like, I'm not sure it's that silly. Like, if you could have, high bandwidth internet
Hmm.
anywhere on your phone, if you just wore a hat,
Mm.
would you wear the hat? Like, it doesn't have to be like a crazy pizza box size hat. They're going to get the size of
They
a hat
have the
for
the
your
the
head.
mini the Starlink
Yeah, the
mini
Starlink, it'll be smaller than Starlink Mini.
right.
It'll be smaller than Starlink Mini. Like, I think, I actually think this is like, this is one of these science fiction things. Would people be walking around with these silly hats?
Well, I
Um,
think that you could conform it to clothing, where it's like on your back or something like that. You would get it so it's like if it was like if it
oh,
was
you make
flexible,
your clothing into a
a satellite thing. Yeah,
what
yeah,
do you
yeah.
call
I think you
the
can do that.
there's a
Yeah,
particular type of antenna,
right.
uh, or a phased array.
Phased array flat antennas. Yes,
Your
yeah.
clothes become a phased array antenna.
Right, right. I think if also you have all your cars, and your Tesla bot walking beside you. Like, why do I have to hold it? You Tesla bot, you hold the
Tesla
antenna.
bot wears the
Yeah,
hat.
Tesla bot wear the hat. I just talked to him. So, so I think that, and for the economics of Mars, you mentioned the economics of Mars and what people would do there. If I make Tesla bot factories on Mars and I make many of them, they start producing millions and millions, then they start doubling. One Tesla bot factory, two Tesla bot factories, four Tesla bot factories, doubling every year, 2 years. And then so I have 1,000 Tesla bot factories in 10 years or 20 years. Then the Mars colonists, they would be at the ratio of potentially to get like a billion Tesla bots, then you have a million people, 1,000 Tesla bots to every person. And then you could say, okay, you've done your time, you've done great work up here. Retire with, 200 to 500 Tesla bots. Take them with you. You were managing 1,000. You can go take them with you. So because you can just like have a money printer there, that basically by making Tesla bots, it's a money printer because it's this asset that does stuff that I can just generate assets there. It's like Europe coming to America, and then America's making factories and cars, and if I'm not counting the pennies, it's just like it's coming up from nothing if I build it fast enough. So then it's like
Well,
you can make a whole economy there.
I just want to clarify. I think there's one of the challenges of building the Martian colony is you have to build out your supply chain so that, the way Elon puts it is it's not a sustainable colony until you will survive if the ships stop coming from Earth.
Right,
I think the first priority is you need to have mining.
right.
You need to have refining of minerals. You
Yep,
need to have and Teslabots will probably do a lot of this work. And
right.
I think the 5 ships that travel to Mars will have Tesla Optimus on them, and they'll
Yep.
probably do things like set up solar panels and set up propellant depots and set
Mm,
up, efforts to harvest liquid water or whatever, frozen water,
yeah,
liquid water, whatever, something to capture CO2 from the air, so
right.
that when the first human starship lands, you've got the infrastructure ready to start generating the propellant to
Hmm.
take because the first colonists are probably going to go home.
Yeah.
The first 10 people are probably going to go back to Earth.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not. Maybe some of them are going to stay,
Hmm.
but I would imagine the first trip to Mars is going to be hard. Like life is
Right.
not going to be that easy for the first people who land. You got people don't know this. It's 6 months to get there. You have to wait 18 months for the window to open again to travel back to Earth.
Hmm.
That's 6 months to get back. So you're basically talking about, I think it's not 3 years, it's like 2.5 years.
Hmm.
So, but it's 18 months on the planet before you can come home. So that first trip, that first 18 months is going to be hard. Um,
Um, Although I think it's 3 months with the Starship because the Starship can refuel. So the reason it takes 6 months for a regular ship to go, and I have a little thing on my deck for that. Let me just pop over to that. By the way, for Generation 3 satellite, it will be, when you unfold it, it will be almost as big as one of the solar panels on the International Space Station. It'd be a wide of the football field. So these satellites can get really, really big. And though that's just Generation 3, if a Generation 4 it could be even bigger, but be the size of a lot of these cell towers I had there. Okay, so the Starlink things, the unfolding, the refueling. Okay, here is this is the speed you need to go. So you see the low speed of 3 kilometers per second. That is the speed of all the probes we've been sending to Mars up till now. The reason being is that I don't do refueling up there. So I launch, and basically the last stage is all I got to go to Mars. I only have, two-stage rocket to get to orbit, third stage to do something to get to high orbit, and then I send this small, tiny rocket, a couple tons, 4 tons, whatever, and then send it to Mars. So slow speed. So I have to use this really low efficiency orbit to get there because I'm refueling completely up in the Starship, I can get up to like 10 kilometers per second by getting a fully refueled full thing. Because I got everything. It's like I restarted, uh, with both stages up there. And then I can do these faster orbits or faster things to get there and this is the window you talked about, where at the peak interval, if you can go 6 or 7 kilometers per second, I can get there in 100 days or less, right? So that's at the point. This thing is 225 days, 200 days, 100 days at the near the bottom there. Several of these lines cross over to 100 days in the narrowest part of the window. So like in January 2020, 2027, I can launch and go for a 80, 100 day if I fully refueled like a Starship can. I can get to faster speeds. So even without fancy nuclear and stuff like that, I can get really fast if I have a lot of fuel. And then they have more detailed calculations on these 75, even 60-day potential transfers if I have enough speed. And I need enough fuel to slow down or I to aero brake into the planet to land. Okay, so also there's some things like if I bring the materials, I can cover up a valley in Mars and fill it with air and make a really big location there for the dome cities on Mars. Oops, and yeah, so
are the canyons that big?
um, I think there are large canyons on Mars. Just like there's the mountain Olympus Mons is like twice as tall as Everest, something like that.
Yeah, it's
So
huge.
there
I know
are
Mount Everest is huge. Yeah.
if you pick the right location, you could, you know, not build the walls and just cover something over, and then you're underneath an area where it's got, you're not being hit by radiation from above, but then you're still open. It's not like I'm claustrophobic inside something. As your point is, you have to build stuff on Mars. You build the
Yeah.
infrastructure, um, build the factories, and then the more you can make yourself you prioritize what is I don't want to bring more stuff on the Starship. So if I make water, if I make fuel, it's making it easier. Things that are really relatively simple to make but are heavy, plants, food, all that kind of stuff. The heavier, simpler stuff I need to start making as soon as possible. And
Yeah.
then I also think you should prioritize getting your construction capability of making useful stuff like a Tesla bot, like mining, like metal, um, like cars,
I think we're more than 20 years from having a chip fab on Mars. I think
right,
getting building a chip fab on Mars is a long way off.
right,
Uh, that's going to be hard. You know, the supply chain for a chip fab and the chip fab itself.
right. So you would,
That's a big
but you
hurdle.
could have some kind of like MEMS microelectronic thing where it's like it's fully enclosed. Like they have some really good printers that can etch and make things. So there could be some kind of like thin film electronic stuff. It's not as good, as really good electronics, but you can make some like 100 micron electronics uh, up over there with a portable capability. And then you work towards how can I get it towards, getting that last bit of capability off. Um, yeah. But I think that even if I have to bring ships over constantly with chips and those kind of things, that would be a tiny amount of weight. So again, it's like, how can I make the weight multiple so
I
that I
think
bring stuff over
can
and the next
can
time
you
I have
get
it?
TSMC to build uh the infrastructure for fabs on Mars?
Hmm. Yes. Well, they're trying to make factories in other places. They're trying to make it in Arizona. They're trying to make it in
Oh,
Japan.
I'm just saying, like if you were trying to make the Mars colony not just survivable but capable of growth,
Yes.
then you need to develop. Like I don't think a million person population is sufficient to have a chip fab supply chain and you know all the other things you're going to want.
Mhm.
So you know ultimately you want the population to really grow beyond a million, and you know then
Right.
you know there's even the like my favorite question is, can humans have babies on Mars?
Hmm.
Will
Right.
will does the gestation, like I imagine you can fertilize the egg on Mars, but
Hmm.
will the gestation, the woman carrying the baby in the womb, the development of the baby in the womb, does it
Hmm.
need 1G?
Hmm.
Will the baby develop wrong in zero point 0.3 Gs?
Hmm.
And I don't know if you've seen my video where I talked about gravity loops, where you basically take a boring company tunnel and
Yeah.
you make a circle
Yeah.
and you have um, basically the entire circle is just like it's just a big train that's circling the loop
Right.
24 hours a day. It stops every 8 hours for people to get off in shifts,
Yeah.
and it simulates 1G so
Right.
that if I were on Mars and this was available, I would probably spend at least 8 hours a day in 1G
Right.
to maintain
Muscle
my
tone,
my muscle tone and my bone
bone.
density,
Yeah.
and I might spend 16 hours a day
Hmm.
in 1G and only be out on the Martian gravity for 8 hours a day. And I think
Right.
if you did, and you would exercise in 1G and you would do things to maintain your bone density. And then that way, when you return to Earth,
Hmm. Yeah.
your body will be ready for the return to Earth because the return to Earth might be hard after you spent 18 months at zero point 0.3 G. And not to mention the travel is mostly
Right.
at 0 G.
Right.
So you really have to work to maintain bone density and muscle structure to be able to survive all that. So
So I agree that
I
construction is needed, and I've worked with and also read the papers on space stations, and they talk about spinning a station, how big it has to be, the rate of spin, and the bigger it is, the less this is
less
due to the
rotation.
spinning, the less rotation there is, so less disorientation that there can
Yeah.
be. So then you make something really big, like I think the minimum size is more like 100 meters. or 50 meters, but you really it starts screwing you up. It's kind of like borderline. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. When you get to like 500 meters, 1,000 meters, then the rate of spin is like, really, really low. And then you
Yeah.
can easily support a large number of people. And I agree that why experiment to figure that out before you bring some animals and say, okay, let's see them have babies. And then then Chester, in the meantime, you say, let's keep our 1G environment with the construction. And the robots and other things can make the thing first. So the first few uncrewed things start setting these things up: air, water, food, other things, maybe the 1G environment, so that the people who come don't have to have that problem. But
Yeah.
maybe again the first 2 years, 4 years they can't do it.
Yeah. But you can
But
see like a boring loop that's a kilometer long,
yeah, it
right?
perfectly works. Yes.
Or let's say, sorry, a kilometer in diameter,
Yeah.
right?
Coming down there.
Uh,
Yeah.
easy to see that. I mean, we already have that much tunnel in Las Vegas,
Right.
that you wouldn't have to go that fast. You wouldn't
Hmm.
notice. It'd be like being on a train on a curve. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
that big of a deal,
Yeah.
and um, that would be you would want to sleep in that.
You
You
definitely for
wouldn't
sure sleep. You definitely sleep there. No way you
there's
sleep outside.
there's 8 hours just sleeping in 1G, and then another 8 hours, doing daily living, and then 8 hours working on the Martian surface gravity, not necessarily working out. And by the way, on the bot thing, I think I don't know about making bot factories. I think it's cheap. It's going to be cheap to ship bots to Mars for a while. Eventually, you want to have factories for everything. But
Hmm.
I do see a ratio of something like 10 to 1 bots to humans.
Right.
Um, even like from the beginning. Like if
Hmm.
if you're going to launch 5 starships without humans on them, and like even like 2 years later, you're going to launch the first human mission, you're
Yeah.
probably going to launch more than 10 cargo missions
Right.
to accompany the one human mission.
Hmm.
Um, I think you end up with, um, a ratio of at least 10 to 1, and things like deploying solar panels.
Hmm.
Like, it's going to set up that you want so, and you had a building with solar panels on the roof. The reality is, land is super cheap on Mars,
Yep.
so you just put your solar panels on the ground. You
Yep.
could literally probably just lay them on the ground, but you probably put a little stand up. It's not like
Yep.
there's animals are going to crawl on them. It's not like there's going to be some sort of plants growing in them.
Hmm.
So other than keeping them clear of dust, I don't think there's a big issue. So, but having robots deploying solar panel farms, because you need the
Right.
solar panel farms to generate the electricity to convert to operate your propellant farm and do everything else.
Yep.
So I think you will see massive, massive solar fields
Yes.
in Mars, and Optimus to deploy that. And I just think there's so many things that you want Optimus to do on Mars.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah,
So if you
that's
had
my
a 200-ton payload going to Mars for one Starship, um, assuming better Raptor engines and then enough for landing and all that kind of stuff, that would be about 4,000 Teslabots if you loaded it up only with Teslabots. And then a Starship with humans, you probably only want to put like maybe a 50 to 100 in each Starship because
I think
you'd
long
want
long
to.
run you're gonna have 100, but in the short run you're gonna have 10 or 20
Right.
until you get the system down.
Right.
On the first
Right.
mission, you're gonna have, I don't know, I would guess 10 astronauts.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then the next cycle you're gonna, if the 10 astronauts land successfully, the next cycle maybe you bring 100
Right.
on a few missions, and then you know once you have to create a comfortable living environment, a
Yeah.
reasonably comfortable living. And once you create a reasonably comfortable living environment, then thousands and thousands of people. And I actually think there's another question, which
Hmm.
I don't know that this is an easy answer. You want to send productive, intelligent people to Mars. So
Hmm.
there's, say, 8 billion people on Earth. Well, what percentage of Earth's population is sufficiently intelligent and hardworking and motivated? So for example, you got to, like, you're not going to send, like, I'm 58. By the
Hmm.
time this happens, I'll be in my 60s, and I'm a lawyer, content creator. I'm not
Hmm.
particularly useful. I'm not particularly skilled in things that you're going to need on Mars, and I'm
Right.
old.
Right.
So, and you're not going to send children. You're not going to send people under, say, 20. It may be 18, but
Yeah.
so you're basically knocking off half the Earth's population right there. And then you say you want people with an IQ of, I'll make up a number and say, oh, it's not you can call it racist or whatever. You say you want people with an IQ of 110 plus.
Hmm.
You're probably down to less than a billion people in the pool
Hmm.
at this
Yeah.
point. So if you want to get a million people to go to Mars, you need 1 in 1,000 people to be willing to go.
Yeah.
And I think it might be a stretch to say, I think it's attainable, but it might be a little bit of a stretch to say that 1 in 1,000 people are willing to go to Mars. 1 in 1,000 capable people are willing to. Life on Earth, despite all the complaints, life on Earth is pretty good,
Right.
right? And so I think it's a challenge to recruit a million people to go to Mars. I think people underestimate that challenge, and um, ideally, you want people in the childbearing range.
Hmm. Right.
So you're really limiting your window. Now you want people who are under 40,
Hmm. Right.
maybe under 35.
Hmm.
I think, and the childbearing thing is, you're not going to start having children for the first 10 years of the colony, but at some point, and let's face it, you may unintentionally be having children
Hmm.
in the first 10 years of the colony. If you got a few thousand people on Mars,
Hmm.
somebody's going to have sex with somebody else and
Yeah.
something's going to happen.
Right.
And it's a little, I would be a little scared to be a pregnant woman on Mars.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
you don't know what's going to happen with point 0.3 Gs. So
Right.
I think that has to be a priority because the colony doesn't grow unless people have kids.
Right. I think though that having content creators and other people going to Mars, if you have a lot of the work being done by Tesla
By Optimus.
bots and other things, then you can be trained to do it. And also, it's like before that mission got canceled for Dear Moon with the Japanese billionaire, you had Tim Dodd, everyday astronaut, being recruited
And
to
there was a
go on a
musician,
mission.
I think, and there
The
was an
musician,
artist.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That the adventurous people who are, um, you know, making content, going back, popularizing things. I think that could have a lot of use, like
Yeah, but I'm,
Instagram,
I'm just
YouTube,
saying,
that
like,
kind of thing.
I think if you think about the demographic challenge of getting a million people to go to Mars, and you probably want roughly 50-50 male female,
Yeah.
and I would say men are much more likely to be willing to go than women.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm speculating based on what I see in gender behavior. I think men are more likely to be willing to go than women.
Yeah.
So um, I think there's a lot of challenges to make it work.
Right.
And you really have to incentivize people to want to go. Um,
Right. Well,
it's gonna be it's gonna be a
that goes
remarkable
to
challenge.
like if I have an abundance of bots and I can say you go and then we give 20 bots to your family back home kind of thing. So basically it's like they're kind of set for life kind of thing. That kind of uh
Hmm. Oh, this is
incentive.
interesting. All right, I'm going to say this. It's very common I think this is common in China. I think this is common in Thailand. That people, and Philippines, this is very common that someone will travel a great distance, like a Filipina nurse will go to Japan or go to the US and work as a nurse, make much better money than they can make in the Philippines. People don't know the GDP per capita in the Philippines is like $3,000 a year. US GDP per capita is like 50 or $60,000 a year. So they come to America, nurses get paid fairly well in America, and they live super cheap and they send a lot of money home.
Right.
So if you were to pay someone to go to Mars in the form of paying their family,
Yeah.
and sometimes the work that they're doing is not in Thailand. There's a perception, at least, that a lot of women from the poor parts of Thailand come to work in the rich parts of Thailand as sex workers. And I'm not
Hmm.
suggesting that we want that, but people are willing to travel if and do endure a lot if they're going to be able to send money home to their family that needs it.
Right.
So I do think that you might get people who are willing to travel to Mars. I think you hit on it. If
Right.
you're going to fund their family
Yeah.
at home,
Right.
then at least in Asian culture, I think you would get a lot of people.
Right. Right. It's also like a tour of duty for the military, a 5, 10 year tour, and then you're set for life, right? Because you're the one willing to do it, and we need this frontier and other stuff done. And then, your family's set, you're set, because you're generating the value of opening up trillions of dollars of value on Mars, then why shouldn't you benefit, that So I think the economics can work out if
Yeah.
we make Mars this making a lot of stuff. It becomes this place where it's like
I
anything that
just
you
want to hit on
want.
one. I just want to hit on one other thing. There's a company, I think it's Lumen, that
Mhm.
is proposed to launch server farms in space in orbit around Earth.
Yes.
And I actually think, well, they have a huge problem with cooling.
Hmm.
And a Martian server farm
Yes.
wouldn't have the same cooling problem.
Right.
So I think there's a question of, does the Martian economy have to be completely self-sufficient, or are there things that you could do on Mars that would be cost advantaged? And then, there's a communications gap that, sending information back and forth to Earth is between 4 and 20 minutes each
Yeah.
way.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were able to do some kind of computation on Mars,
Hmm.
it may be that, it's easy to deploy solar on Mars.
Right.
It might be easy to deploy nuclear on Mars than it
Yep.
is on Earth. And you may like, it's an interesting question. What's the competitive
Comparative.
advantage?
Yeah.
What's the comparative advantage of Mars?
Right.
What can you do on Mars that you can do better than can be done on Earth in a relative sense to be able to produce something of value that you sell to Earth,
Right.
and then Earth is sending something back. And I
Right.
think something like, you could have, especially if you were heading to an age of like, we need massive AI server farms for training and inference.
Right.
If you need real time work, then it won't work. But if you're doing training, training isn't real time.
Right.
So
Yeah, it
if you
takes
can
6 months to do the training. So if 18 months to do
yeah.
bigger training, it's like it'd be valuable.
The point is that the transmission time of 20 minutes to send the data back to Earth is trivial.
Right.
If you had a 1 week, even a 1 week training run,
Right.
right? It doesn't have to be a 6 month training run. A 1 week training run, if it takes 20 minutes to send the data back, who cares?
Right.
So, and the data is a CSV file, right?
Right. So basically, solar on Mars still works. There's less solar because of the distance. It's a little bit less, but it's still like half or 40% or something like that. So basically, then if I make square mile after square mile or square kilometer after square kilometer of solar panels, I can get to hundreds of gigawatts, terawatts of power over there because I'm just spreading out. No one's
Yeah.
stopping me, and we're going to like lots and lots of
There's no
power.
zoning. There's
There's
no
no
zoning.
zoning, right? So then I need to get to, right now, they're going to spend like $125 billion on two server farms, AI server farms in North Dakota. Supposedly, there's some rumor that that's going to happen. So then spending $100 billion to send something over to Mars, even $10 billion per flight, and then I unpack and I make all this solar, lay all this solar out. So I got like, um,
Yeah.
100 gigawatts. That'd be a bigger solar farm. And it just took
Well,
two
I
years.
also think that you could probably manufacture solar panels on Mars a lot easier than you can manufacture a lot of other things. So
Yes,
building the infrastructure to build solar panels on Mars would be, I don't think
early.
there's, I don't think that, I think, I don't know enough. I don't think we know about what's the in situ resources on Mars, but you may have enough resources on Mars, and that's far less high tech than NVIDIA H100 chips
Right, right.
or Dojo chips. I think solar panels are relatively low. They're still high tech, but they're still relatively low tech compared to some other things that we build.
There's lower tech versions of solar. So I've
Yeah,
looked at this kind of thing, and I think the Mars Society has looked at these things where you can pick the right chemistry. Oh, I'm only 15% efficient, but so long as I can make it there, then I
yeah,
don't care. I have to make twice as much. It doesn't matter, so long as it works. So I can
yeah,
pick the option. Okay, I can't pick this option. This thing is rare, but I can pick this option. And the same thing for batteries. If I
yeah.
pick this one, it's a more power, more density. I don't care how heavy it is.
Yeah,
I just want it
manufacturing
to,
batteries as well. Manufacturing batteries as well. Maybe
right.
there's not enough lithium on Mars, but there's sodium, and you can make sodium ion batteries.
That's right. Right.
So
So
those are
it's like,
two examples of things that I would want to manufacture on Mars quickly, so that you can, because if you can ramp up electricity production
yeah,
and electricity storage,
yeah.
that makes Mars very advantageous for certain kinds of things that you would.
Industry, information technology, all those things where just like I bring it over there and
Yeah,
then I can just spread out as much as I want, load up on power, and I'm good. And
yeah,
that is the simplified path, simplified supply chain to high profitability. And
right.
then and make it so I can send information back.
And then
So
once you have all the energy, then all of a sudden being able to generate other industries and other supply chains becomes a lot easier.
right,
Yeah.
right. So I think, fortunately, Warren and I have able to solve the Mars SpaceX economy. Elon has to watch this video. You need to tweet about it, and I'm gonna send it over to you so we can get
I'll
him to
DM him.
you DM him. Yeah,
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 not going to
yeah.
ask him.
DM him. Yeah,
I can
and
DM him. I never have. I never will.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. But Elon needs to watch this because we've solved the Mars economy, what we need to make, and how to get people over there, to and motivated to go by paying their families. So a lot of things that we figured out in this video. So
Sweet.
great talking to you, Warren,
Thanks,
and people
Brian.
can join us next time.